Okay, so I don't know if you noticed, but so far in every single video I made, I have been wearing a t-shirt. And I always try to choose a t-shirt that sort of makes sense, has something to do with the topic that I'm talking about. The thing is, they're not always obvious. Like, I am aware that in many of those cases, I chose a t-shirt that in my mind has something to do with it. In my mind it makes sense, but yeah, I'm not sure how obvious it is. So I'd just like to know, have you noticed? And also, I'd like to invite everyone to just, like, when you figure out the link between the t-shirt and the topic, feel free to leave it in the comments. Eternal glory shall be yours if you figure it out, for a very relative understanding of eternal glory. Hello there, I'm Simon. Welcome to my channel. Today I dive again into the past of pride, and it's time for episode 4. And in this episode I want to have a look at someone who might just be the first recorded transgender person. We are once again going all the way back to antiquity. It's time to talk about the Romans. More specifically, an emperor known as Elagabalus. Now, this person is said to be transgender. So, while the known world knew her to be a man, she was in fact a woman. So, I'm just gonna call her Elagabala, if you don't mind. And if you do mind as well. So today, I want to look into it and see just how true that is. So, let's start with the basics. Who is Elagabala? Her official name was actually Emesa Marcus Aurelius Antonines, because Roman emperors always have way too many names. 4 is actually not that much. But if that's her name, why does everyone call her Elagabalus? Well, that's because she decided to pull an Akhenaton. If you don't know who Akhenaton is, he was a pharaoh in the 18th dynasty, in like the 13th century before the Christian era. He was also Tutankhamun's dad, by the way. What's special about Akhenaton, however, is that he decided it was time to get rid of the polytheistic pantheon and replace it with a monotheistic, well, it's not really a pantheon anymore, is it? He said that everyone would have to worship the one god Aton from then on. Didn't really work, but he tried. Anyway, the point is that Elagabala tried to do something very similar. In this case, the god Elagabalus. This god originated in Omessa, Syria, and in about 220 of the Christian era, Elagabala the emperor decided to make this dude the main god of the Roman Empire. She even went as far as having a huge temple built for him on the Palatine Hill, which is pretty much the most important hill of Rome. I mean, they're all awesome, but the Palatine is like the royal hill, you know? Anyway, the Romans didn't really like this new god, obviously. In the end, Elagabala was kinda tricked into appointing her cousin, Severus Alexander, as her successor, and that kinda sealed her fate. In 222 of the Christian era, she was killed by the Praetorian Guard, who were supposed to be her bodyguards. Of course, the Praetorians spent as much time killing emperors as they did protecting them, and in this case Elagabala was dealt the short end of the stick. That sentence doesn't make any sense, but you get the idea. To add insult to injury, after her death, something called damnatio memoriae was executed on her. Damnatio memoriae means that a ruler was so hated that people decided, bleep them, let's erase them from history altogether. And the same thing actually happened to Akhenaton. So yeah, Elagabala was kind of a controversial emperor. And one of the things she was infamous for is also the reason I'm even talking about her in this series. She was said to have been transgender. Some guy called Cassius Dio claimed that she loved wearing makeup, dresses, even wigs, that she preferred being called lady, and that she even went around looking for doctors who could perform gender-affirming surgery. So, assuming Dio is a credible source, that's pretty clear. And that's kind of the problem. Is he a credible source? Well, he was a contemporarian to Elagabala, so he certainly would have known what he was talking about. And it also makes me doubt that he would have gotten away with making claims that are so remarkable without getting called out on it. So that makes me think that there is at least some truth to this. Here's the thing though. The post of emperor started with Augustus as a primus inter pares kind of thing. Not some guy who gets to be emperor because of his lineage, but just the highest civil servant. It's like the difference between a king and a president. And Rome does not like kings. That's the whole reason the Republic was founded in the first place. And that whole primus inter pares thing was the main reason they even accepted an emperor. We call that bit the principate. But by the time of Cassius Dio, that changed. At this point, we've been through a couple of dynasty changes, and we start seeing traces of what is to come. The Dominate, which is the period where the emperors had become literally just kings. No more primi inter pares BS. These guys were here to be boss. Now, at the time of Elagabala, we're not technically there yet, but it won't be long. Why is this important? Well, our friend Dio over there was a senator. As such, he was not a fan of kings, or emperors who behaved like kings. He wasn't against having an emperor, but he did believe it had to be someone who is suited for the job, which is not too much to ask, I think. And he seems to have been in favor of, well, offing the ones who were not good at it. Unfortunately, Elagabala was on the wrong side of Dio's judgment. That whole religious thing was not good for her reputation. But that was by far not the only thing she did to upset the establishment. She also married a Vestal virgin, which was kinda not done. She supposedly pranked people by releasing wild animals on them at dinner. She is said to have literally tortured her guests. She had 1 or 2 husbands, which is kinda beside the point because sexual orientation has little to nothing to do with gender, but everyone always brings it up, so here it is. She was so bad, there's top 10 most evilest things they did devoted to her. She's in the ensemble for an evil emperor song. It's horrible histories. It's kinda what they do. So basically, whether or not she was indeed transgender, this is not a good person, according to historians anyway. The point is that either she was evil, or the historians made up a whole lot of BS to make her look bad. Either way, it's not a great sign. But regardless of whether or not all of this is true, it's still significant that they write it at all. Because the amount of anecdotes that point in this direction does show that there's probably something to it. It sort of implies that even if it's not all true, that is at least the impression that her contemporaries had of her. And if that's the impression they had, I mean, they must have gotten it somewhere. So there must be something to it, I think. But if you read all those escapades she got up to, they seem kinda juvenile, don't they? Evil and juvenile. Like, if a teenager became emperor of Rome, this is exactly what would happen. Yeah, that's because that's exactly what happened. Elagabala was 14 when she became emperor, 18 when she was killed. Teenagers are always searching for who they are, searching for where the boundaries are in whatever situation they find themselves in. So when a teenager becomes emperor of the Roman bleeping empire, behavior like this is kinda to be expected, isn't it? Problem is, when you're the emperor, the price for going over the line is not detention, but assassination. When viewed in that light, a 14-year-old emperor who doesn't really care about politics and instead spends their time doing what they like and trying to figure out their identity isn't actually that weird to me. So if you ask me if I think Elagabala was transgender, my answer has to be, I don't know. I never met her. I have no idea what went on in their heads. So I just can't know whether or not they were. But it does seem very possible and very likely that they were. At least that they were somewhere under the trans umbrella. There's a case to be made for them being gender fluid or non-binary. At the very least, I would say that Elagabala was queer and searching, but probably trans, one way or the other. Here's why that's not a good thing. This is a trope. Here we have a gender non-conforming person who is also kinda mad and does things that most people would define as evil. GRSM villains are a trope that's used way too much in fiction. It implies that cis heteronormativity is good and GRSM is evil, which is obviously BS, that goes without saying. But implications like that can, in the longer run, have real-life effects because they reinforce prejudices. And here we have a real-life person who was pretty much a living embodiment of that trope. I hope I at least gave some background to this whole issue. So let's get to the YouTube thing. You know the drill, peeps. Please leave a comment if you spotted a mistake anywhere, and be sure to let me know what you think about Elagabala. Also, let me know down below who else I can talk about in this series. I have a list lined up, but your input is more than welcome. If you like the show, please consider clicking that like button below, and if you like the series, there's a whole playlist of them. And I promise you that there will be more in the future. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss them. And don't forget to ring that bell so YouTube will let you know when they arrive. And share the video with all your GRSM friends, your fellow history fans, and everyone else really. And you can find all my sources and my socials down below. Et nunc, salve et gratias ut videretis.